There you are.
All right.
How are you?
I'm good. And how are you?
I'm all right. I'm okay. Where are you? Where are you now?
I'm at my home, which
Okay.
we just now, well, just like a couple months ago, we bought the world's largest microphone collection. So we're turning this into a museum. So it's kind of like what's happening here now is that,
I saw that on your site. I saw there was a link to a museum of microphones.
yeah, so we're just getting that together now. It's still chaos in here, but
Well, I mean, you taught me so much about microphones in the short space we had. I mean, I didn't know anything, so it might have been a good starting point. But this one here you
yeah,
recommended to me, which is what we use to record at
yeah.
Capital, right?
Yeah, and that has to be probably the finest microphone in the world, and I'm so glad you got that mic. Holy cow, it's great.
Well, I couldn't believe the difference it made because I've never, I've always sort of I have a weird relationship with equipment where I kind of I'm slightly suspicious of its um, I guess people raise it to such a high level, and I always think artists are artists and they'll make whatever they're going to make with whatever the fuck they've got, and I worry a little bit about not so much with actual like hardware, like proper hardware and like vintage equipment that has its own history, but the sort of marketing of like plugins and gear and just this idea that you can sort of purchase a degree of success,
Yeah.
or a sort of purchase a sort of artistic merit rather than having it come from you. I've always found that slightly suspicious. Do you ever find that kind of thing? Like people
Oh
are sort
yeah.
of like, here, if you just had this, you would sound like this.
Well, what I find is that if you choose your equipment carefully and you're the artist, that your performance changes because of uh, the immediacy of what you hear. That what you hear initially is going to be better, so
Right.
you're going to perform better. So there is something to having a holy grail type of microphone, and it may not actually be that big of a degree of improvement as it
Right.
is your perception of what you're doing becomes enhanced. So
That's so interesting,
you
though.
could do it either way. It's like a placebo almost, uh,
Yeah.
in that it'll make you a better singer. But what you've got there truly is like the holy grail. It's
But that's so
yeah,
interesting. This idea of interacting with something that just makes you feel a certain way,
mhm.
and that feeling then does translate to what you do.
Well, it's like when you dress up. If you dress up in a suit, you might act a little differently than when you're
Right.
wearing shorts and a t-shirt, you know.
Oh, exactly. It's true. And I think that there's a sort of there's that feeling you get. Like I know when you put this thing in front of me, I just felt, entirely unworthy of it. And you try and you want to sort of rise to the occasion, and it sort of ups your game to an extent,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Or you try. I mean, I don't know. I mean, microphone's a bad example for me because it's not my area at all. But I've found that with other equipment, like if I'm working with a particular filter that has a certain history, there is this sort of sense of awe that kind of it does affect what I do. Like the actual experience with the instrument does
Yeah,
kind of, right,
sure.
which is
Yeah.
interesting, especially in a time when we're sort of given all this virtual stuff. It's all like, hey,
Right.
this virtual thing and that virtual thing, and sort of put yourself in a space. And I've seen you go to great lengths to record in unusual places and
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
wonder, is that really to do with the artist's interaction with the experience, or is it the acoustics, or a combination of those things?
Combination, and in fact, taking the long way around to get a result it imprints something different into the music too. I think that there's an adventure kind of feeling that the listener gets when they listen back.
It
Yeah,
translates, doesn't it?
yeah, I think it does translate, and I feel sorry for the artist that takes the that just uses a preset, and of course it sounds great, but they're missing the point
But
almost.
they're cheating themselves out of an experience.
Exactly.
It's a kind of impoverished experience.
Yeah. But then a lot of us, we don't get to chance to work with the really uh, exotic equipment. So it's nice to have the plugins just to actually to learn what these things are.
Yeah, but maybe it doesn't need to be sort of unattainable experience. It just needs to be an experience. So rather than having the end result always be the focus, the idea of just having a colorful journey is
Yeah.
also valuable, right? And it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that you're always reaching for outrageously exotic gear.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just do. I think I was talking about this. I can't remember where, but I feel like there's a price we pay for convenience, and it's a sort of impoverished experience, and especially when you're talking about art. Because like you said, it does translate. I feel like you can sort of tell when somebody's enjoying themselves in a piece of music, or if somebody's heartbroken, or right. It's obviously.
And isn't that what it's about? I mean, the music is communicating an emotion. So,
right.
especially if you're truly feeling that emotion, I think it's imprinted into that music.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about like expertise, like the sort of, because I have this strange idea that I have the best, the most creative time possible when I don't fully understand what I'm doing. I mean, I know that doesn't sound quite right, but I don't have a full sort of mastery of something. I'm discovering it. And I almost sort of trying to extend that honeymoon period of not really knowing what the potential of something is. And there's a sort of excited state and an inquisitive state that I find is very productive in that way. And if you're working, I mean, obviously with gear that you know very well and you really understand its capabilities, like how do you, I mean, first of all, do you ever have that sense of that kind of that mystery about something while you're discovering it? It can be very creative, or do you feel like you need to really get your head around what something does in order to utilize it properly?
It's something that I talk to students about. There's a lot of students that come through recording classes, and I think it kind of almost spoils the discovery aspect of what we do. So I think it's important to master the equipment so that it's not in the way. It's not between you and the music.
Right.
That can happen a lot. But I will purposely bring in something that nobody knows anything about, and we'll use it all wrong, and that's okay, And for a while, we're all learning it together. The client and myself. And so, yeah, I think it's important to stay on the edge of not quite knowing. That seems important today because technology is changing so much. So one thing that you can do is step back into older technology and rediscover older technology, and that's where these vintage microphones are so incredibly interesting.
Right.
It's, how they work and who used them, and the possibilities of the sound that you can make with them. So yeah, it's a delicate balance between mastery and discovery.
Yeah, it is. I guess like lots of things in the end, it is all about balance, isn't it? And if you can find a useful place in between those things, then you're in it, right? Of course. Right. Yeah, I know. I think I was very sort of cavalier about production when I started out, and I was convinced that, you know, it's just about ideas, and all this technical stuff is like a spectator sport. You know, it's like collecting trains or something, or collecting, you know, it's for people who are interested in acquiring things rather than using them. And as I've done more and more recording and I've learnt more and more, I found that that's entirely wrong, that actually it really is a balance of those things, because you do have those sort of dogmatic people that are like, these are the rules and this is how it's done and this is blah blah blah, and on the other end you have the people who are like, yeah man, if I learn to read music, it's like all the magic's gone, you know. And I just don't think either of those camps.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you need to have a certain amount of actual knowledge, because there is structure to this stuff, right? There is actual theory that makes sense, and to ignore that is just stupid. At the same time, to box yourself in so that you can't ever. I mean, have you ever worked with classical musicians?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
It's interesting, right? There's sort of an unwillingness in a lot of that discipline to improvise, for example.
Right.
It's almost.
Yeah, I work with a young string player who is classically trained. Yeah. But he can improvise. It's a unique person that can actually do that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you also have a collection of vintage synthesizers that's beyond imagination. I mean, when you get a new piece of equipment, a vintage piece or a new piece, then how do you incorporate that in? I mean, do you sit and experiment with it for a long time, or do you already know what you're doing with it?
Oh, no, I mean, first of all, I honestly don't really have, I've got a few things that it's certainly not a big collection. I have a few things which I kind of adapt and learn with. But I was talking to, oh God, who was it? Oh, I can't remember. But we were talking about gear and collecting gear, and I had a similar conversation with him where we were talking about that thing of the excitement of a new synthesizer that you don't quite know how it's going to behave, and you have all of these musical ideas kind of worked out, and the synthesizer sort of collaborates with you because it doesn't quite do what you want it to do, which is the charm of it. It feels like you're having a conversation with the thing, where it's like, actually, here's a different idea, and you may or may not like it, and you kind of have to then go, well, holy shit, I never thought of that. Maybe we should go down that road, or maybe you're just like, actually, you know, not now. Can we just put a pin in that and
put a pin in that and save that one for later?
Do you mind going in this direction, please? You know, and so there is a sort of a little argument you can have a lot with unreliable gear, which I love. I love that inconsistency and but then you do have to pair that. Sometimes it's just like, holy shit, I know what it is I want to do. I need a thing that just does that. You know, otherwise it's just, I mean, you can just noodle around and have an endless amount of fun and never actually get anything made, which I think is the world inhabited by a lot of synthesizer, you know, enthusiasts, and more power to them. Like, great, man. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. but some of us do actually want to like make a track or make a piece of music that we have an idea of in our heads. And so for that, you need that balance, I guess.
Right, right.
Right.
Right. So, like, for instance, in a production, you might lay down the main idea, get it down using equipment that you're really familiar with, and
Right.
then just introduce the unconventional, the piece of gear that you're not sure what will happen, and just add that in at the end and see what happens. You know, it may replace parts, it may be its own thing. Yeah.
You know what I think is interesting is having a sort of a framework, like a sort of line drawn sketch of your track. So you have parameters you're working inside, so you have structure, but then within that you allow a lot of room for play and a lot of room for spontaneity, right? And then maybe you can get to a balance that way of doing it, you know, because I think if you just start off just in the mist with endless options,
yeah,
right,
you never get finished.
You're going to have a lot of fun, but that's about
Yeah.
it. It's a drum circle, and
Yeah,
if,
right.
right, and on the other hand, if you've got it, I don't know. I mean, I guess it can be very. Did you ever go through periods of time when you felt like you were too controlling about what you were doing, and maybe it was suffocating the spontaneity of the thing, and you had to sort of calibrate?
Oh, well, being that most of the music I work on is not my music,
Yeah.
I have to gauge the production to the project, the people
Right.
that I'm working with, and see, like, if they need structure, if they're wild, and my job will be then to rein them in and to create control.
Yeah.
So that we can actually get something really useful. And creative people sometimes are very scattered like that. So I can really play an important role by kind of reining it all in and putting a form to it, putting a frame around their idea. In other instances, I'll get the opportunity to really stretch out, and I'll add my own parts, and I'll add my own vocals, and it will become something completely different. But that has to do with the person I'm working with entirely, you know, because oftentimes it's not my music, and it's important for me to step back and make sure that I'm not putting my imprint all over someone else's project.
See, but that's a whole other layer of expertise, right? That's a whole other skill then, because obviously you're an artist in your own right, but you're working with artists and kind of mapping your knowledge and your perspective onto somebody else's entirely, you know, decoupled view with maybe different objectives. And I've no idea how you do that. I think I'd find that incredibly, because I mean, do you ever hit an impasse where your creative instinct is at odds, you know?
Yeah.
And then what do you do?
But I have to remember to not be precious in that.
Right. Okay.
It's really about the artist, and I can make the most beautiful, ornate frame around their picture.
Right.
You know, but it's really their picture. It's the impact of their picture.
Sure. I guess that's a skill in itself, right? Being able to temper your ego and your own right aspirations and have a bigger picture in mind, which I guess is the role of a producer, right? That's the thing. You have to have this big picture and make sure things are working together, I guess. And
make sure things get done.
Yeah,
make sure they get finished, and they're on budget and on time. You know, the things that the uncreative things that producers have to do.
Yeah, no, I guess so. Well, anyway, I mean, I wanted to, you know, to give you a heartfelt thanks for being involved in this record. I mean, you know very well how peculiar and unfamiliar it was for me. So it was actually incredibly. I don't know. It wouldn't have happened if you hadn't said, hey, actually this probably can work, because in my mind it was so far from being something that I'd ever do. The closest I thought it could be would be where, you know, like we'd originally set out, can you find a guitarist and a vocalist and something like that?
Right.
And I think you're I don't know, just you're saying, no, actually, let's try this and let's see what happens, made me kind of go, oh, okay, let's, you know, and I don't know, I just feel like it's hugely indebted to you, because I would never have tried that. And obviously, you know, it's imperfect and it has its oddness about
Beautiful.
it. But I'm proud of the record, and I'm proud that, you know, I felt like, I don't know, I liked being that far out of my depth, and I'm grateful for you for holding my hand and taking me out there so I wouldn't entirely drown, to use a drowning analogy.
I'm honored to have been a part of it. Thanks. I think it's a brilliant record. I love it, and it shows a completely different side of you and what you do. So,
well, it certainly was a transformative experience to speak into a mic, you know, because I know that I don't actually sound like this at all. I'm like, hi Sylvia, tell me about the compressor. That's how I actually sound. But this is quite transformative, and it actually lets you take on a different character. And obviously, like I still can't sing, but I could at least sound like somebody who could, which is great. Or a little bit like that, like an idea of someone who could. So thanks for that.
Yeah, of course.
Hey Sylvia, thank you. Thanks.
All right, well, stay healthy and safe. And,
yeah, you too.
hope to see you soon.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.